Commanders got some defensive help. Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com, have stuff up now, pros and cons, analysis of every Commander's draft pick, including the one I'm going to talk about right now, cornerback Trey Amos from Ole Miss. So again, that's on ESPN.com. Just a couple programming notes. I will be back after the draft is complete. It'll be completed Saturday around 7 o'clock. I'll probably get a podcast and all that. Look for that. If your video stuff, the YouTube stuff will come out Sunday morning, because go out and have fun Saturday night, because I think everybody is going to be tired of at that point. So look for the video, especially on Sunday morning, probably the podcast as well. So anyways, but I will wrap it up, and I will have another one for Monday, and they have stuff throughout the week, just kind of getting you up to date on who these players are as players, as people. It's when I bring it on people who know them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So on day 2, Washington has 3 picks, one in the 4th, one in the 6th, one in the 7th. I will get back to some of that later in the podcast. I'm recording this during the 3rd round. So there are going to be some guys that I don't know if they're going to be there or not in the 4th round. So going to try and stay away from saying specific names in the 4th round area, some running backs, some edge guys. But anyways, let's get to Trey Amos, because that's the newest Commander for sure. So first of all, another pick I really like. And it's funny because when we did our mock draft for ESPN, we obviously had the 29th pick that I had to decide on. There were 3 guys that I was primarily looking at. It was Maxwell Hairston, Josh Connolly, and Trey Amos. They picked 2 of them. So they did not pick the guy that I did. Now, I will say all those guys were, first of all, Connolly was the number 1 guy at that spot for them. But Hairston and Amos are definitely guys that they really liked. So it's, anyways, I just think it's funny that they got 2 of those guys that I was considering there. And I would say this, they did not expect to get both those guys, because they did not expect Amos to be available with the 29th pick. He's a guy that they would have considered had Connolly not been there. Maybe Harrison's not there, or one of those 2 guys would have been the pick, or could have very well have been the pick at 29, because they liked both of them. And now they've got the Amos, and he's a guy, I'll be honest, like early in the process, he's a guy that really stood out to me as far as the kind of guy I think that would fit well here. And so I think it's a good pickup for them at 29. It's hard to say. It's funny because we had the discussion in the press room earlier. Does the guy fall, or is it just, some teams have a guy rated here, some teams have him here. I am surprised that he lasted to 61, but, different flavors for different folks at the position. He was there. They grabbed him. They feel very happy. In fact, after they made the pick, we were in the auditorium, and when it was finally announced, we could hear the cheering from the war room that was in a nearby room compared for where we're at in the auditorium. And you could definitely hear Joe Witt exalting some joy after the pick, because he gets some necessary help at a position that is a premium position. And we'll get into all of that in a minute. But I did think it was funny, and I asked Adam Peters later, well, how many notes did Joe Witt leave on your desk this morning? He kind of joked, he said none, but I think there were some people, some agents or whatever, jokingly sending him some notes about guys that they'd like him to draft. So kind of a funny thing, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, there was the note that Cliff Kingsbury left on Adam Peters' desk, which basically said, take the tackle. So I wish Cliff had sent me that note, so I would have taken the tackle for them in my mock draft. But that aside, good pick there, good pick in round 2. So for a couple of reasons. One, premium position, and you're filling a big hole. Well, let me say this. They needed another outside corner opposite Marshawn Lattimore. Like Jonathan Jones, I really like what he adds. Mikey Samuel really like what he does. Igbenogany is a good backup guy like that. The other 2 guys can start, Jones and Samuel. They both can play outside. They are both best suited inside. That has never changed. Like, they can play outside, competitors, tough, and all that. They are better inside. This gives Washington the ability to then maybe do more mixing and matching with coverages, because there are times where if like Sam still is covering outside, Maybe he's not suited to cover guy, but he's got to do it because he's got to play outside. Now you have another guy that can play outside as a true outside corner. Could Amos maybe play inside? Maybe, but that is absolutely not where they envision him. They definitely envision him on the outside. And Peters even said, like, yeah, could he? Yeah, probably, but that's not how they see him. But again, this gives Washington the ability to play guys where they are best. And I think, like, I've been saying this for a long time. Like, I felt like they needed another outside corner. And I knew that's certainly one of the spots they were looking at in this draft for sure. And just to get another guy with size, like he's 6'1, 190. He's not a massive guy, but he's a good size for a corner. They just didn't have that aside from Lattimore. And the other part of that too is, well, this is where it's great to have the versatility of Jones and Samerstill, because Lattimore's played, it's a combined 26 games the last 3 years. Can you assume that he's going to, what we don't know what to expect from him this year in terms of the durability and holding up over 17 games. So you almost assume that he's probably going to miss a couple games. Hopefully for the Commanders, he does not. But if he does, now you have another option, because what you wouldn't want is to have a very small corner trio out there, which if there's no Lattimore, which would be Jones, Samerstill, and Igbenogany. All those guys are like 5'10" and shorter. So tough, compete, like that, really like what they offer with the mindset and all that, but you want a little bit more size out there in a true outside corner. Now you have two of those guys on your roster. It's such a good move because of that reason. And I know, could they have played with the group they had and be fine? Yes, right? They have four guys who are three guys who can start in this league, and a fourth who provides good depth in Igbenogany. Now you have five guys. This is good corner depth. It's the same thing they did with their offensive line. Like they're building a really good offensive line, and at the same time, you're creating quality depth. That helps you win games at these positions. Offensive line, you definitely have to have that depth. Cornerback, you definitely have to have that depth. It's like pitching in baseball. You never have enough corners to get through a season, right? Because now you look at teams around the league and they have a lot of guys who can play receiver. Teams like to pass the ball. It's good to have that. And I think the other thing, I think it's good just because he's a good player. And the more good players you have, the better roster you build. And, was it the most pressing need? I think it was a need to get another corner for sure. But again, could you have played? Yes. But let's look ahead to like next year. We don't know what to expect from Lattimore, and will he even be on the roster in 2026? Don't know. Igbenogany 1 year, Jones 1 year. So now you have two young guys who will be certainly part of your core defensively moving forward in Samerstill and Amos, and possibly Lattimore, depending on his health as he continues to play in this league. So the other thing is, he's a couple of things that I like about Amos, and he started off at Louisiana Lafayette, transfers to Alabama, plays there, plays a lot there. Not a full-time starter, but plays a lot, and then transfers to Ole Miss because a defensive coach who recruited him to Alabama ended up going to Ole Miss, so that's why he went over there. But I do like guys who travel a certain road. I don't like to see guys transferring all the time, because what does that suggest? But in this case, there was a change in coaching staffs at Alabama, so he goes to Ole Miss, and I think so it's more excusable. But he also did very well there, and I think he 3 interceptions, 13 pass breakups. One of the things with Dan Quinn when he was in Dallas, with his 3 years as defense coordinator, they led the NFL in interceptions. Washington only had 7 last year. They need more guys who can get their hands on the ball at that position in the secondary anywhere. And the other thing, when he's creating, he creates situations too. You get 13 pass breakups. You go back and watch some of his film, and you get some of those balls tipped. Who knows where they end up? Maybe somebody else is coming over and grabbing it. So he may not always get the interception, but maybe he creates opportunities for others. I also think you can create those opportunities through alignment, through scheme, whatever. Because when you're watching him, there are definitely times like you're lining up in man, and then you're snapping off into a zone, and you're surprising the quarterback. and then now you're getting your hands on the ball. I saw that a couple times where it looks like he's carrying his guy out, turns, comes off because he's handing him off, some sort of match. Well, whatever, but he's coming off, reads the play, comes up and makes a pick. Saw that a few times, just understood his assignment and executed it well. So, again, physical. One of the things I liked about him is he's not he's not this punishing tackler. He doesn't need to be. He is a willing tackler. He will come up aggressively. He may not he's going to try and get you down for sure. There's sometimes it's a little bit grabby, but he's going to get you down. In some ways, it's a little bit like what is Fred Smoot as a run defender. Smoot was not a great tackler when he came in the league, but he was a very willing competitor, and he evolved into that. I think Amos is certainly going to come in a little bit further than that, so I don't, he's not going to shy away from it. He'll compete with it. That's one of the things I liked about him early in the process. Like early in the process, he was the corner I really liked at 29 because from my perspective, because I felt like he could play some physical press or play more press and zone. And I think that length was really good. He moves well. I think he stays connected to the receiver. I think that's the phrase I'm looking for. But again, a willing tackler, for sure. I like how he plays with his eyes. I like the vision he plays with. And again, I think that you can disguise some things with him, and that's good. So all in all, a good pick. So I think in their minds, for sure, it's really good value because he's a guy they would have looked at as a first round at 29. And it's funny because that's why I say there's such a wide range of where some of these guys could go and how they might fall on a board. They might be a late second round pick, but you may have had them as a late first round target, right? But another team may not. Clearly, other teams didn't see it that way because he was still there, and that's how Connolly the same way. Like I told you yesterday, there were teams that were looking at him higher in the draft, and there were a couple teams that were looking to trade back into the first round to get him, and he was there at 29, but he could have gone earlier if for one team, if it had broken a different way, maybe that's the guy they take. They did not. He ends up sticking to 29. These guys benefit. So kind of a similar situation with Amos. And there's just a lot of guys who are kind of in that same ballpark in terms of ability. And I bet you on the boards, there's not a great deal of difference between a lot of these guys and some of these in the like rounds, late first into late second. So again, that's why you may find a guy there that you really like that you would have considered higher up in the draft. And this was the top guy on their board at the time. And one thing I like about Peters is he does stick to that board. I can't emphasize enough. You build good rosters by drafting the top guys on your board and not just saying, oh, we have to get an edge rusher. We better get this guy, even though we don't like him as much as this guy. Yes, the position is important, but if you're not sold on that guy to become a certain player, just because he plays the position, you got to be sold that he can develop into something more. And if you're not, you're absolutely taking the best guy and think the guy that you think can develop, and that's Amos. There were a few pass rushers in that second round that I liked, that I think I liked. Nick Scorton was one. Oladeju from UCLA. He was the guy that I was kind of like, if he falls there, that would be to me a really good pick because I think I know some of these guys, the people here feel like he would be a good chess piece for Dan Quinn because he has the physicality of an inside linebacker, but he could rush the passer. But he was gone. So Scorton gone. There are few of those pass rushers gone. So Landon Jackson, the guy they like, he goes later after Amos. So can you get another guy at that position? Yeah, you can. Now it's going to become a developmental guy, and I will say I don't think the D line and the pass rush from the D line will be dramatically worse at all compared to last year. In fact, they may be a little bit more. Um, I don't know if the sack numbers will go way down because again, all they've lost is Dante Fowler. It's 10.5 sacks. I get it, but I would not consider him a great pass rusher. I thought he had a good year, and can they create that with what they have? I think there's a little bit more depth of pass rushers. So they may not have a guy who gets to 10 sacks unless it's Frankie Louvu, but they may have more guys in the 5, 6, 7 range. So it's going to be a little bit more of a spread out thing rather than getting that one guy who can go get you something. But even Fowler down the stretch was pretty quiet in that regard. A lot of that stuff happened in the first half of the season. Second half, it was a lot more quiet. So, again, I think it's something that you've got to continue to address in some way, but I'm not going to be shocked if they didn't. I'm not shocked that they didn't take a pass rusher in the first 2 rounds because it's kind of what I'd heard that don't be surprised if, because they do like that depth along the front and they like what they're building there, but you don't have that main guy. Like you look around the NFC East, those other teams have some studs in that front. Um, the Eagles do not have a top edge rusher. They do have a really good defense. They have a really good interior guy, but they don't have that top edge rusher. So, but yet they've got the corners. They got this. They got that. They're linebackers, whatever. Point is, like, we'll see what happens. But stay tuned for a round. I'll get to some more of that in a minute. But I do find a couple of things I find interesting with this pick is the use of analytics or just the metrics they use to determine to analyze guys, right? Clearly, they're going to watch a lot of film. Clearly, they're talking to a lot of people. So when I talk about analytics, they are not only going by that, it is a piece of the puzzle. But in their metrics, Peter said that in 5 or 6 areas, he ranked in the 90 percentile of corners, or yeah, I think it was of corners, which is really good, right? And it was like 96% when he was facing a top, what they considered a top receiver, right? So like that's obviously very good. Now, I don't have the context for all that. I don't have the comparison. I know what they said, and and for them it clearly mattered. But I'm also pointing out the depths to which they're analyzing some of these players, because in the past, you're not going to hear a lot of that, but they are much more reliant on that stuff now than they've ever been. And it's funny because they used it for Connolly too, and they're very big on going back and analyzing the matchups that he had. And there was, the couple of games like Peters pointed out the Alabama game when they played Georgia in the SEC championship a year ago, does a nice job, does a really good job there. There were a couple other games that he pointed out, and I forget, I'm trying to remember which other games. There were a couple other games that he definitely pointed out, and it was, hold on one second, I'm going to tell you. It was the South Carolina game this year, and then and I saw some of the stuff against LSU as well. So definitely, in playing that conference. The other thing that he brought up, this is why those top, so this, I'm going to tell you this is why these top 30 visits are important. So one of the guys, Amos, did not visit here. It's why you can never know what they're getting from here. But one of the key parts of the visit was with Trey Harris, who is a receiver from Ole Miss. And Peter said that he got some, when had Harris in here, they clearly asked him about Amos, and he talked about how tough it was going against them in practice, the matchups they had, and just et cetera. But like, I just found it interesting that that's another reason for those visits, is to find out information about other players, especially from a school that has a number of guys who are possible draft picks for your team. So that was something else that I thought was interesting for sure. But I do think like they're going, the depths to the analysis is pretty good. And I think you also have to know that Peters at his heart is a scout. So he really listens to his scouts, trusts what they say, always brings up their names. And I think that, that's good for him, like at his core. And I think it's why when you trust what the scouts say, I think you tend to make probably fewer mistakes where there's certainly other situations, whether here or other teams, where maybe the scouts will sit there and say this, this, and this. They know them better than anybody, but a coach might say, yeah, but, and then they may go with the coach, which then creates, perhaps the wrong pick, because the coaches don't always know these players like the scouts. So when you listen and trust your scouts, I think you probably end up doing a little bit better than if you don't. Probably a lot better than if you don't. And that's one of the things I think Peters as well. He's very good at bringing up those guys in the press conferences. just because he wants to give them credit because he knows the work they put in. And when you do that, like they feel valued. And when they feel valued, they're going to do more for you and find better information because they know they're going to be heard. And I think they are definitely heard. And this was not a forced pick. I think this truly was a board pick. And I just think when you look at the Eagles, they have AJ Brown and obviously Devontae Smith. You had to solidify your corner crew there. We saw the difference that the corners made for Philly last year. This group will be interesting to see because you get Lattimore healthy, you get an Amos coming in, you have Sanders still or Jones or whatever playing inside. And we'll see. Like, I'm not assuming that Amos is going to win the starting job right away because, again, you're going against pros. This is a group that is absolutely 100% built on competition, so they would not hand him the job. But the expectation at some point is you better win the job, right? If you're not winning the job, there's a problem. But again, if let's say he ascends to a starting role and beats out Jones and Sanders still, and one of those guys is going inside, you have now created a really strong competitive environment for the corners you have. And I just think that leads to better play from them, leads to better play from the receivers too, because now you're going up against better competition in practice. Always a good thing. That's what they want. And you have to take all that into consideration. The Giants have Malik Neighbors, the Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, these guys, Marshawn Lattimore was brought here to combat some of these guys, but now you have options. And what if the matchup with Neighbors is better with Amos? Like, then that's who you're putting on him. And it makes it just that much better, right? It just gives you more options how to create and craft your defense. And I think that is always a good thing. So, again, now let's look ahead to day three. I'm not going to give names because as I record this, the draft was still going on. I do know uh, they would like to get a running back. I've told you that. I don't think that has changed. And I think there's some guys that will definitely be there. This was a draft that you could say was going into the fourth round was pretty good. And I think that's still definitely something that they would absolutely want to get because they need to have more there. They want to get some more offense for sure. And, I think that is a targeted position, I would say. And I'm looking at right now, I'm looking at the list of guys who have gone and they're still there are definitely some running backs on the board that I think would be interesting. Tootin is still around. I don't think he falls to them in the fourth round, but you never know because I think the expectation for them was third round. So there are definitely going to be some running backs there. Giddens is still out there. Taj Brooks is still out there. So there are definitely guys that are still out there. There's more than a handful of running backs I think would be somebody who could come in and help them edge rusher, and I would say too interior pass rusher as well. Aiden Huntington is a guy that I think to watch in the sixth or seventh round. I brought up Carlin Vigors, the corner. I don't know that now that they're going to go that route, but he could be an undrafted free agent as well and still continue to build depth and be a guy that you can develop for the future. Because when you're getting him in the sixth, seventh round, that's what you're getting him for. So whether he's seventh round or a UDFA, that's fine, right? Just get a guy in here you can develop. David Walker is a guy that's a pass rusher. Could you develop him? I think that's, somebody to watch, kind of an undersized guy, but somebody that maybe you could get something out of, right? So I think it'll be interesting what they do there. And I know like a lot of people are worried about edge. Where are you going to get the edge help? Again, I don't look at their D line as being that much. I think it's better overall as a group than it was a year ago. And now they have to go prove it. No doubt about that, but it's not like they were, again, four-man pass rush was not good last year. Is it going to be any worse this year? I mean, I do, I think the bigger factor for that group, you better stop the run. You cannot get run over, right? So, but as a four-man pass rush, even with Fowler at 10.5 sacks, the point is it's I don't think it's going to be worse as a pass rush group. But if it's a better run defensive group and it's about the same as pass rushers, okay, then now you're in better shape. As long as you get more consistent play from the corners, and because there were too many big plays that it felt like in the key moments, whether it's Lattimore having some issues in the playoffs, St. Juice with the penalties, whatever. Like it just wasn't happening enough where they would come up with the key stops and certainly didn't take the ball away. So that's why I like this pick. But again, you build a good roster by taking good players. But so for the last three picks, see if they get a developmental edge. See if they should. I would be surprised if they don't get a running back, but I won't be shocked because the guy has to be there. And I think we're seeing with this group, they're not going to just take one to take one. Um, and then we'll see with that. Eugene Asante is a linebacker. Maybe in the seventh round, he can run. Maybe another guy to come in here, develop, play special teams. Same with Huntington, would be a good special teams guy. Big fellas who can run was in Huntington's an 11-4, 100-yard dash guy in high school. Big fellas who can run, always a place for them on a roster. But anyway, that's it for me. I'm starting to ramble on again. And so we're going to cut it off. It's getting late. We're now into Saturday morning, and I will be back out here Saturday afternoon for the final three rounds of the draft and see if Washington adds any more picks. Could they trade up? Could they make a trade to get another fourth round pick, trade back to get a couple fifths? Who knows? Stay tuned. I'll be back to wrap it all up and then just kind of get some final thoughts on the entire draft class as the draft comes to a conclusion on Saturday. I will say after the first two rounds, I think this team did a nice job. Is it some sort of fantastic, oh my gosh? Probably not. They're not splashy, right? But I think they're very good, solid picks. There you go. Anyways, that's it for me, folks. I'll be back after the draft to wrap it all up. So I'll talk to you next time.